The ATU index is a numerical cataloging of fairy tales, folk tales, and fables around the world, filing them neatly away into smaller categories. So, for example, an ATU 328 is a boy steals ogre treasure type folktale, or Jack and the Beanstalk. The Smith and the Devil is an ATU 330. A 402 is an animal bride. Grateful Animals is a 554. Rescue by Sister is a 311. Beauty and the Beast a 425C. Friends in Life and Death is a 470. Name of the Supernatural Helper, aka Rumpelstiltskin, is an ATU 500. But today we are here for the ATU 505, or the Grateful Dead. So we are going to be reading a Danish Type 505 Grateful Dead folktale called The Three Pennies. Mind you, this has little to do with the San Francisco band sharing the same name, or does it? The way that folklore surrounding the band, initially they were a quintet known as Mother McCree's Uptown Jug Band Champions, and the keyboard player Ron McKernan, I forget his name, Pigpen. He thought it was time for them to go electric, and they picked up the Warlocks as their new moniker until they found an East Coast band sharing the same name. So they turned to the tried and true method of grabbing the nearest big book and opening that up, this dictionary, and pointing at the first word you see, that becoming the name of the band, and it was a Type 505 or Grateful Dead. So again, this has nothing to do with the band The Grateful Dead, or does it? So I'm going to be reading the Danish. It's not a Hans Christian Andersen, but it is The Three Pennies, and the story begins with a soldier who had faithfully served his king and country for many years, and on the count of his age he was given a discharge. As a thank you for his bravery, commitment, and service, he was given a small loaf of rye bread and 3 pennies. On receiving these tokens of the king's gratitude, he was set free from service to go where he would, and so he set off into the world to see what Providence would bring. As he set off along his way, savoring his newfound freedom, he met 3 men walking in the opposite direction to him. In their hands they each carried some type of digging implement. One carried a spade, another carried a shovel, a third carrying a pickaxe. All of them seemed to be in an agitated state of mind. Curious as to what they may have been up to, the soldier stopped them and said, "Hey, where are you going with all of these tools?" One of them replied, "This I will tell you as you ask. Today a man died and was buried owing us all money. We are determined that we should be paid, as we are going to dig him up." "What a shocking notion!" exclaimed the soldier. "Can you not see he is incapable of making a payment? The dead should not be disturbed. He cannot pay you, so leave him in peace." "That we will not do," said another. "He owes us each money. We must have our payment, so he must be dug up." On seeing that the men would not listen to reason, the soldier said, "Look it. If I pay you 2 pennies, will you then leave the dead undisturbed?" "2 pennies will only pay 2 of us what we are owed. What about the third?" said the other man. "How is the third man to be compensated?" Seeing that the men would only accept a full payment, the soldier then said in disgust, "Since your greed has taken over your reason, I will also give you a 3rd penny. Take these 3 pennies and be happy that you have now got what is so dear to you. Take it and go, but leave the dead in peace." So content with being paid in full, each one of the men left. They went on their way, leaving the dead man undisturbed. The soldier walked upon his way, reflecting upon the greed and foolishness of some people. As he walked, he noticed that a pale stranger was now walking by his side. He was somewhat puzzled. He had not noticed when he had joined his company. As the soldier turned to look at the pale stranger, he also turned and saluted him. He continued to walk alongside him without saying a single word. So they continued to walk throughout the evening, and as midnight approached, they came to a church. The pale stranger said, "Come, my friend, let us visit this holy place tonight." The soldier looked at him in bemusement and said, "Surely that would be improper at this hour. What would we be doing at a church at midnight?" However, the pale stranger was most insistent, saying, "We have to go inside. We must do this." After much argument, the soldier and the pale stranger entered the church. They walked down the aisle to the altar, where there sat an old woman holding a light burning in her hand. They walked up to her, and the pale stranger said, "You must take a hair from her head and smell it." Puzzled, the soldier did as he was told, but nothing happened. The pale stranger told him again to pull another hair from her head. Again, the soldier complied, and nothing happened. A third time, the pale stranger told him to take a hair from her head and smell it. This time, the soldier pulled a tuft of hair out of the woman's head to smell it. At this enraged her. She marched out of the church carrying a lead vault with her. The two followed her out of the church, and they came down to the beach where the lead vault sat by the waterside. Then the pale stranger said, "Come, we will go forth to the sea. Therefore, take your seat." "Where is the ship?" said the soldier, who was now completely bewildered. "You must have faith in me. Just sit yourself in this vault, and we will sail over the sea to the land where there is a princess who, it is told, is destined to marry a man who sails to her land in a lead ship. This will make your fortune," said the pale stranger. So the soldier got in and sat himself down, and the pale stranger sat next to him. The tide came in, and the lead vault rose in the water and floated out to sea. It floated on and on for many days across the wide open water, and eventually it came to rest on a beach on the other side of the sea. People soon gathered around to welcome them, and there was great joy and happiness that someone had arrived across the sea in a lead vault to claim the princess as the prophecy had foretold. The soldier and the princess were married with such splendor and magnificence there had never been seen before and was never seen thereafter. After the ceremony, the bride and groom left the church and entered a carriage that was waiting for them, and the pale stranger followed them and also got in. The coachman asked where they would like to be taken, and the pale stranger quickly said, "Drive with all possible speed to the other side where the sun rises." In obedience, the coachman whipped up the horse and drove off wildly, heading for the other side. On their way to the other side, the soldier looked out of the carriage window and he saw a herdsman. So he called upon the coachman to stop. The coachman quickly stopped the carriage, and the soldier leaned out and he asked the herdsman who he was. The herdsman then replied, "I am the Count of Ravensburg, and there in the castle, there in the distance is my castle. I am the Count of Ravensburg, and there in the distance is my castle." The pale stranger then urged the coachman to drive on as quickly as possible, and presently they arrived at the Ravensburg castle. The coachman drove through the gates, which shut behind them, and as they were climbing out of the carriage, they heard a knocking at the castle gates, and they went to see who it was. Looking through the window in the gate, they saw it was the herdsman, who appeared anxious to come in. The pale stranger asked what he wanted, and the herdsman, who was also a conjurer, told them he had every right to enter the castle as it belonged to him. The pale stranger thought about this for a minute or two, and then he said, "To be allowed in, he must suffer the whole fate of the rye." The conjurer looked at him puzzled and asked, "And what is the fate of the rye?" The pale stranger then told him, "To suffer the fate of the rye. When autumn comes, you must be scattered and sown in the ground and lay under the cold earth through the dark days of winter. When springtime comes, you will burst through the earth and grow and ripen in sunshine and rain, and when you are ready, you will be harvested. You will be cut and dried and placed in a barn, and there you will be threshed. That is part of the fate of the rye." "I am to be threshed?" cried the conjurer, aghast. "You will be threshed at first and then ground in the mill," replied the pale stranger. "Threshed and ground?" shouted the conjurer, becoming angry. "Yes, and then sifted," the pale stranger told him calmly. Upon hearing he was also to be sifted, the conjurer became so outraged that he burst into flintstones. The pale stranger then turned to the bride and groom and bid them goodbye, saying, "My friend, you are now married to the beautiful princess who loves you, and you love her. The troll of Ravensburg Castle is dead forever, and all of his treasure in his castle are now yours. I have been as good and generous with you as you were with me when you gave away those 3 pennies to pay my debts purely out of the goodness of your heart. I have no regrets about giving away those pennies, and I have not once mourned their loss. Why, I would do the same again to provide the dead with a proper burial," replied the soldier. "That I well know now, or I could never have been able to help you. But now, having helped you attain your heart's desire, I have repaid you, and I can no longer stay. I go now where I belong. Therefore, farewell." And with that, he shook his hand and dissolved into nothingness before his very eyes and was gone. The Three Pennies, the Type 505 Grateful Dead folklore fairy tale.